This week we will be talking about the Akan World. And up in Blackboard, I have a link and then there's a video, and it gives you a brief overview of the history of Akan. And the Akan World, and I really would hope that you take the time to watch that. We have two really important influences here that we will talk about that really alter the civilization, and they are the introduction of the Islamic faith, and then also the introduction of Europeans, namely first the Portuguese. So when we look at the Akan, a distinct feature of many Akan cultures is the dynamic interaction of visual motifs and verbal expressions. And this is very important. I'll show you an example in just a second. The Akan, until recently, oral and without written, have a special reverence for elegant colors, elegance, colorful, subtle, and elusive oral discourse, and particularly for the use of metaphorical speech. Akan arts include a repertoire of several thousand visual motifs, from abstract symbols to representational objects and scenes. Each motif is associated with one and often more verbal forms, sayings, or proverbs. A spiral shape recalling a ram's horn, for example, calls forth the maxima, slow to anger like a ram, but unstoppable when aroused. Okay, so if I show you the next image here of some swords, we can look at these. Nearly all forms of Akan art have evolved so as to include one or many of these visual signs. Cast gold ornaments attached to steed swords, as I'm showing you here, are good examples. Some are merely emblematic, and then others, the heads stand for a defeat, a decapitation of an enemy, for example. So this could stand for the enemy that's been killed. Others, however, have more complex or multiple verbal associations with them. So it's like this really kind of foreign idea for us, but these visual oral traditions are very important, and then they're appearing in this art that I'm showing you this week. And so then the whole idea of the king and the royal power, let's say, is very important even today. And what the king is wearing here is very important. We have, yards of cloth that he's wearing, rings on all his fingers, lots of beads. Beads are very important in this culture. And the idea of him dressing like this, it has a relation to both the supernatural and an idea of protection that is given to the king through all of these things that he is wearing. And another thing that's very interesting and really, maybe out of the norm for us is the idea of thrones, stools, and chairs. And these become really important in this civilization. And traditionally speaking, the stool without a back is important and really predates the introduction of the European cultures or influence from the European cultures and the Islamic cultures. We have the idea in this oral tradition that in the 700s there was a golden stool and it just appeared from the sky, whereupon it fell on the lap of the king. And there is this whole idea of the spiritual power that lives within these stools. And this is associated symbolically to this day as the unification of many of the Akan people under the Ashanti. And, the idea of a stool being able to do this, I think we think that being really on a far and different level, but we have to kind of take our head out of that. And this is what they believe, and we should try to respect and honor that. As part of this class, I'm trying very, very hard not to teach it from a truly Western perspective. So here we have an example of what happens after they do have interaction with the Europeans. We have a number of different types of chairs that start to be created. Namely, we have the introduction, we now have chairs with backs like this, and you can see how this looks much more like, we would think like maybe a medieval chair from Europe. And these are dating though to the 17th century in Europe, so actually after the medieval period. And they're associated or affiliated with the Akan leaderships in art. And so these are really, really important objects. So two things to think about when we're thinking about this group of people. We think of this oral tradition without writing, and how the nuances of their language are then, let's say, visually interpreted through their arts and have meaning. And then also this idea of chairs and stools being this object that has this kind of supernatural power associated with it is very important.